Good evening and welcome. I'm James Brent, Professor of Political Science here at San Jose State. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the Don Edwards Lecture with State Senator Jim Beall. The Don Edwards Lecture was named after and initially endowed by a longtime member of Congress from the Bay Area, Don Edwards. He was known as the Congressman from the Constitution for his dogged support of civil liberties and civil rights. And further information about him can be found in your program. I know he'd be very pleased at the choice of tonight's speaker. His son, Judge Len Edwards, is with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming him with a round of applause. San Jose State University and the Department of Political Science would like to gratefully acknowledge the support of so many people who have helped make this event possible. We'd like to thank the College of Social Sciences Dean's Office for its support, as well as the support of our many donors, whose names are listed in the program. I'd also like to thank Christy Williams, Shannon Gallagher, Brittany Trin, and Amy Nguyen from the Department of Political Science for their logistical support, and Carly Hasbrook from Senator Beall's office for her assistance. Tonight, Senator Beall will make brief remarks and will then engage in a conversation with Professor Emeritus Dr. Terry Christensen. The event will end promptly at 7:20. About halfway through the proceedings, I will be distributing white index cards to anyone who would like to submit a question to Senator Beall. Finally, I'd like to ask that you take a moment to please make sure that your cell phones are silenced. Introducing Senator Beall tonight is Norberto Dueñas. The Department of Political Science is so proud to claim Norberto as an alumnus not once but twice. He graduated from both our undergraduate program and our Masters of Public Administration program. He then had a distinguished career in San Jose City government, serving as both the Deputy Executive Director of the San Jose Redevelopment Agency and then as San Jose City Manager from 2015 to 2017. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Norberto Dueñas.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. It's a pleasure and certainly an honor and a privilege to be here this evening. I've been away from home, San Jose, for the last 2 years. I've been doing some disaster recovery work, or consulting, as you will, as they say, over in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I've been back now since last month. I had the pleasure of visiting Jim in Sacramento just this last week, and we've also gone to breakfast just to reminisce. One of the things that Jim and I always talk about is how proud we are of being San Jose State Spartans. And I think that that's something that's extremely important. But did you know how many Bealls are San Jose Spartans? Well, I have some information from you. You know, Jim is known for hiring some very good staff throughout the years. And here's some data that I think you'll find interesting. The Beall San Jose State legacy began with James Thomas Beall Sr., 1948 bachelor's, 75 master's degree. Of the 10 children born to James Beall Sr. and Catherine, 8 attended their hometown university. Jim Jr. graduated in 1974 with a degree in political science, followed by brother Patrick, 1977, in geography, brother Fred, 1981, geology, and sister Colleen, 1981, liberal studies. And then 4 years later, a second wave of Bealls arrived. Mike Beall received his bachelor's degree in engineering in 1985. Frank Beall graduated in 1981 with a master's degree in social science. And in 1993, Mary Beall, like brother Mike, received an undergraduate degree in engineering. And sister Katie also attended San Jose State University. So we are very proud of being San Jose State Spartans, and I can tell you that if not for the education and the support that I was provided here, I know that my career path might have been a little bit different. So I'm very, very honored to be here. My first encounter with Jim is I actually interviewed for a job. And I was in the master's program in the public administration program back in 1984. And they called it a scholar internship program. It was run at that time by Professor Doug McIntyre. And I put in an application, and I was interviewed by Jim. And he asked me to work on this very exciting project, which was look at all the city charters throughout the nation and do a comparison with our city charter here in the city of San Jose. And one of the reasons for that is because the city had gone through some, what we used to call the $60 million bond loss many, many years ago, and we were looking at making some structural changes at City Hall, and that was my first project. Little did I know that a few months later, when I was visiting my family who was living in El Salvador at that time, I received a call from Jim in El Salvador, and he asked me to join his staff. And so in 1995, I became a full-time staff member for Jim Beall. And while it was a job, it was an interview for a job, little did I know that I would find my calling at that particular moment. So a very, very important time, certainly in my life. But as we know, Jim, on whether it's transportation, whether it's healthcare issues, whether it's affordable housing, we know that he's been a leader in every single one of those sectors. Jim, as a council member and a county supervisor, was known as an advocate for the county's neediest residents, including emancipated foster youth, disabled individuals, and the uninsured. He worked to reform Medi-Cal and welfare programs and to create safe and affordable housing. I remember staffing him on that particular issue on affordable housing. I remember when we created the Department of Housing in the city of San Jose to ensure that that program had the proper focus and the proper emphasis at that time. He was elected to the Board of Supervisors in 1994, where he served 12 years. He continued to champion those causes. He chaired the Board of Supervisors Children, Seniors, and Families Committee and considered one of his most important contributions to date the successful passage by the Board of the Children's Health Initiative. His interest in improving the foster care system was underscored when he was in the Assembly. He was appointed to chair of the Select Committee on Foster Care. And of course, we know about Jim's transportation work. He and I used to drive up to MTC in Sacramento over the years as he worked on policy and budget, really making a difference not only in the state, but of course in our region. He was a member of the Traffic Authority, the Santa Clara Traffic Authority, the first half-cent sales tax initiative that led to the construction of Highway 85, the widening of 101 and 237, and actually set the stage for many other ballot initiatives that came after that. We knew, and Jim knew, that this one really had to be successful to make a difference. One of the things I remember about Jim, and everybody knows he's a hard worker, was accountability. We remember when we met with Caltrans officials after the passage of the ballot measure, and when we were discussing a timeline for the project, we asked Caltrans, well, how long do you think it'll take working with you to implement this project? And I believe Caltrans said something like 25 years. That wasn't going to work. We will not be able to implement those dollars in that amount of time. But we worked on a new structure and a new system, and Jim brought people together to make sure that we could implement those projects on time and certainly within budget. What I learned from Jim is not only hard work, but bringing people together for the common good. Working in his council district, when people ask me, even after I finished my 2 years as city manager, what was the type of work that made the most difference for you in terms of throughout your career, it was the years that I served with Jim. It really, really made that difference. Jim said, you're the link between city administration and the community. Let's make sure that the needs of our residents are being met. And that is something that I was able to carry on throughout my years. It's important, though, when you ask Jim, what are some of the political lessons that he's learned? And in an interview by Washington Square many years ago, Jim said, patience. You have to be willing to work with anybody and have a collaborative view. You can't let your ego get in the way of reaching solutions. And as he would note, when he was a county supervisor, you needed agreement with a certain amount of people, usually 3 or 4, to get the majority. But when he became an assembly member, you needed 120 legislators, plus the governor, to be able to get things done. My last point is Jim received just recently from the American Public Transportation Association the State Distinguished Service Award. His extraordinary leadership to improve transportation infrastructure through numerous creative approaches has greatly supported public transit in California. Jim, of course, maybe all of you know, is the author of Senate Bill 1 that signed into law in 2017, the most significant state effort to address transportation infrastructure needs in decades. Projects throughout the state will benefit from the $54 billion measure. We're already seeing the impacts. We're already seeing the road work here in our local community, and we have Jim to thank for that. He's been a dedicated public servant for over 30 years, and it is my honor to introduce my former boss, my mentor, and my good friend, State Senator Jim Beall.
Thank you, Norberto. Hey, 300 meetings we went to, right, for Highway 85. I don't do that to my staff right now, I think. But I'm really grateful to be here today. I love, as you can tell, I love San Jose State, and I love San Jose. And I tried to do the good for people for almost 40 years now. So I've been, it's been hard to keep going, fighting, and taking on the controversial issues. And I look to others for inspiration when I do that. I really do. I look to my constituents. And one person I admire is, I just want to say, the Dalai Lama. And he says, I was in, as you can see, I've met him in Sacramento, and he says, if you can, help others. If you cannot do that, at least do not harm them. You know, he has a good sense of humor. And we have a man in the White House I think could use a thing or two from him, you know, learn a few things from that guy. And, but here in San Jose, we have our issues. You know, we have our issues here. And one of the most important issues, as we heard, is housing. Housing is actually the issue that led to me being on the path to being an elected official here in San Jose. And I started when I was a student here at San Jose State, and I worked with homeless students as a housing coordinator for the San Jose State student government. And my job was to find homeless students housing and advocate these issues with the school administration. And because I was a successful advocate, it kind of led to my political endeavors and my election endeavors. So I started here working with students, and it made a real difference, helping the students here at San Jose State. And I found that when I reflect on the issues that I learned when I was student housing right here at San Jose State, I think the biggest lesson that I learned from all my career is an individual who should shape the government policies. It's the individual who should shape the policies, not the government, not the other way around. So we need to have, when I'm shaping policies, I'm going to empower all people to have the best life they can. So I look to the individual. So, and that's because people are the ones that really build communities. I did learn a few lessons from Terry Christensen, as you can see, when he taught us that. People build communities. Now, I'll tell you a story. In Campbell, there's a woman who lives on the street there, and she suffers from mental illness. And for years, I've tried to get her off the street and into a home. She rejected everything I proposed, everything. In her words, that wasn't a good fit for her. And some people may be shocked at her response that she had. Why wouldn't she want to get off the streets except a place to live? And over the years, in an attempt to help her, she has actually spent a considerable amount of time telling me why my efforts were failing her. Okay? You know, she was telling me all the things I didn't do right for her when I kept trying and trying and trying. And too many legislatures try to have a solution before they understand what the problem is. So it was time for me to listen, because you have to be patient, as we said, and find out what the problems are. And we can't force something to her which is not right for her. And who was I to tell her what was right for her? Now, not many people have benefited from the cookie cutter government affordable housing kind of programs. It's kind of a cookie cutter programs, and we all know so far all those programs have failed. They have failed. So we have to look at an approach, I think, that goes back to what I talked about, helping people and supporting people and letting them live up to their potential. We have to look at the individual and listen to them. And I think as a county supervisor, another story, I worked there, and I worked with a youth empowerment group, a youth group. And they were very active, and while I was attending one of their meetings, this young woman, who was one of the female leaders of the group, she pulled me aside and she said she was in foster care, and she was about to turn 18. She was going to be kicked out of her foster home the day of her birthday when she turned 18. Okay? Essentially, she was going to become homeless. Okay? She told me that her only option was to go back to her abusive parents, the father of which sexually molested her. That was her choice, or live on the streets. She had no money. She didn't have the means to truly be on her own, and you know, how many 18-year-olds you know are able to do that? Think about that. Not many, hardly any. Again, I started calling around, I did my work, I finally found a place for her to live. I was successful in finding a studio apartment for her. And but I learned the easiest way to help her really was to keep her in the foster care system. You know, not kick her out when she was 18. And that was the lesson I learned by helping her. And around this time, I was elected to the legislature and could make real reform by helping more kids like her. And the timing was right, because what happened is the federal law changed at that time, leaving the door open for state governments to extend the age for foster youth and start programs allowing kin support programs for foster youth. So I saw an opportunity to make reform, so I introduced a bill extending the age limit for foster youth from 18 to 21. And it might not seem like an easy thing to do in the middle of a budget crisis in 2011, but that's what we did. You know, it was the worst time in terms of budget we could possibly imagine. And so they told me it was too expensive, but I knew the kids needed me and needed help, and quite frankly, you know, about a quarter of them actually were homeless the day they became ineligible for foster youth assistance. A quarter of the people went out on the streets the day that they were turning 18. And I see policy through these people, and I'm proud that I was able to achieve that law. It was the law that benefited kids. It was the first law in the United States that extended the age, and now most states have adopted the same law. And most states realize it saves money. Why would we want people to be homeless when they're 18? And I saw the policy through the people that I was serving. And by the way, we now have a Guardian Scholar program at San Jose State because of that law. And we have a program that helps students at San Jose State that are in foster care stay in school, get scholarships, and get their degree right here at San Jose State. So isn't that a good thing for the Spartan foster kids? It's called the Guardian Scholarship Program. And I'm proud of that. Now, a few years ago, we had another situation. We had a group of former female athletes, gymnastics, swimming, grown women came to me for help. And they were friends, and they all competed at a high level in these sports and with each other when they were young, when they were kids and older. And they trained at special athletic clubs because they were like the elite kind of athletes. And they were all molested by their coach. Okay? And of course, like many kids, they never told anybody. They didn't tell themselves, or nobody was told. It wasn't until they were older, and they had like a luncheon reunion, and one of them had the courage to talk to each other women about what happened to them. And everybody went around the room and said, "Me too." Two powerful words, "me too." And those are the words of warriors, survivors, heroines, and heroes. And they knew that he was still coaching. They actually saw him on television while they were watching the Olympic finals, and they saw the coach in the background that molested him on TV, coaching the Olympic team. The same person that molested all of them. And they got lawyers, but they needed help from me. So they came to me and they said they couldn't sue the person for what happened to him because of the statute of limitations was too short. And the limits had been passed for them. So we needed to change the law to allow people to feel heard and seek justice. And again, it was my job to pass legislation that would help these and other courageous survivors heal and live their lives free of the burden or shame they may have felt. And I was able to pass a law, signed into law by the governor, and allows the abuse survivor to press criminal charges against a molester until the age of 40. And we passed the law for civil cases this year. For those of you that had that kind of circumstance, there's now a window that you can file a lawsuit against somebody that did that type of thing to you. And if you have more information, just call me up. But those people were in need of help, and they say that over $1 million was spent by the clubs, the churches, and other groups lobbying against my bill. Over $1 million on lobbying. And they even had at a sermon at my mother's church, they had somebody stand up and talk about how my bill would destroy the church. Okay? So my mother says, "They are not the church, we are the church." That's what she said. You know, my mother got her master's at San Jose State in education, so she was, you know, pretty firm on that. Now I want to close a little bit here and talk about housing again, thoughts, because I think right now that would make the biggest impact on the people's ability to have a good life, housing. And like affordable housing, it's driving people into poverty, the lack of it, driving people into poverty and putting people on the streets. And I know this because I actually hear from them. And elected leaders must set housing as a basic right, look at it differently than we looked at it before, and look at it in terms of unburdening people like nothing else can in terms of helping somebody. Working people could save money, invest in their children, their future. Kids can go to school without burdening and the burden of wondering where they're going to sleep the next day. It happened to me. When I was 14, we had a fire. It burned down our house. For a year and a half, we didn't have a place to live. The 12 people in my family. So I had a little bit of an experience like that. And so I had some empathy. And it drove me to work on the housing issue as well. Such a simple thing, you know, that people take for granted, but it can make a big impact if we had a good housing program on all the people in California. So this is my goal for next year, is to work on this housing issue. We have to get people off the streets. We have to have homeless. We have to have programs for everybody in California. And to make housing affordable, the state has to once again put as a priority an ongoing program for affordable housing. We don't have that right now. And thank you for letting me tell you a few stories. I spent a long day. I got up real early, and I went to the Central California Women's Correctional Facility in Chowchilla, California, and met with 4,000 women in prison there. And one of the problems is we have too much incarceration. And I intend to work on that issue. That's not the right way to house people, right? Let's have real housing, affordable housing for people. We will solve a lot of our society's problems if we do. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Well, it's been a while, and we've followed your career and we've been engaged with one another on a variety of issues and continue to be. The Five Wounds Trail, for example. I want to take us back to what Norberto said about you being proud of being a Spartan, and ask, what is it about San Jose State that specifically helped you along on your career?
Well, I think getting my interest in the student housing problem probably was the big thing, and then having my education kind of pairing that, studying urban politics, because that was my emphasis in the political science department, is urban affairs, urban politics, and it was, it led to my interest in, you know, looking at city governments, planning, housing, and that became my focus.
And we worked together on the campaign for district elections for San Jose City Council, and you were elected to the first district representing council in 1980. So that's almost 40 years in elected office. Did Don Edwards endorse you in that race?
He certainly did. I've known Leonard Edwards as Don Edwards had known me since I was a kid, right, Leonard? Because my dad worked for Don Edwards at the title insurance company at First in San Carlos Street. So Dad worked with Congressman Edwards and his business, and Congressman Edwards is kind of a mentor for my life.
So he endorsed you for city council, county supervisor, state assembly, at least?
Yeah, of course. Don Edwards was always, and I'd go to him for advice. He was a great congressman. He served, he wrote the civil rights law. He was involved in writing the civil rights laws of the United States. Can you believe that? The congressman from San Jose writing those laws? It's very historic. He's a very historic person. Right, Leonard? Judge Leonard Edwards right here, folks.
And truly a local hero.
That's right.
So we're happy to have, I know he'd be happy to have you here as a speaker. When we started this speaker, Don was still around and attended for many, many, many years, but was always pleased with the quality of speakers who were invited. And we do think about that when we choose speakers for this this lecture series. So you started your career very young. You weren't 30 yet when you were elected to the city council.
Yeah, 28.
What's your advice to the students in the audience who might be thinking about a political career?
Well, I think, for example, I was, of course, not the best student in the political science department. I'd say Frank Beall here, who's East Side High School District Board, was far better than me. And of course, the best student in my class was Ken Yeager. There was no way anybody can pass Ken Yeager. And, but perseverance and hard work, getting involved in the community, spending time listening to people, you know, going to the professors when you're stumped, asking for help. I mean, you know, simply asking for help, advice. I did all that, stumbling my way through those years, trying to do as best I can, working hard. That's my advice. Getting on a state board or commission. I did that. I was appointed to the City Planning Commission when I was 24. Thank you, Janet Gray Hayes, great mayor. People don't know about her because she's the only mayor in San Jose that doesn't have anything named after her. She was a great mayor, and she should be recognized somehow by the city.
I certainly agree with that. So you served lengthy terms on the city council, 12 years, I think. 14 years on the city council. And then on the county board of supervisors, 12 years. And then the state assembly and the state senate. You were termed out of every single one of those offices.
Yeah, the laws, my original term on the city council, the voters approved an initiative for term limits for 8 years. I think that's the way it is now.
Yeah, in 1990. Yeah.
1990. And then the Board of Supervisors originally was 8 years. It got extended to 12 years. And then the state legislature, it was changed for 12 years, but it allowed certain members that had middle of their term like me to go another 2 years. So at the end of this term, it'll end up with 14 years on the state legislature for me.
Yes. So you were termed out of every single office. Everything. So my question is, what do you think of term limits?
I think the term limit law should be much longer. If you're going to have a term limit law, it should be longer. The reason why is if you don't have it longer, the staff in the government will dominate the government, not the elected officials. So it creates an imbalance of power, I guess, if you want to say it that way, between executive, like in the state legislature when you had just, the assembly had 6 years, people would go in the assembly, but it's 6 years total limit, but at one point we were getting out of 80 members, close to 40 every 2 years were new. So that's somehow ridiculous to understand that you're going to have somebody with expertise chairing committees on major things like healthcare, education, all those kinds of things with such a short tenure, and then 2 years later they leave. You know, the leadership would leave after 2 years. It's ridiculous. So I think that gives the balance of power creates problems.
Yeah, also the lobbyists stay around a lot longer than 6 years.
Yeah, the lobbyists are around, and you know they used to say that they come in with like the issue I talked about earlier with the statute of limitations. They had I think about 50 lobbyists work against my bill. So they almost had one person for every 2 members of the legislature. And they're just overwhelming, amount of money that's spent. And I think that creates a disbalance of power. And it's not really right.
So lengthy terms on the City Council, County Board of Supervisors, State Assembly, State Senate. Which level did you actually enjoy the most?
I'm having a lot of fun now. I'm doing some big bills. I'm getting them passed. I'm getting a lot of bills vetoed. I take a lot of shots at big bills. I won big on transportation. I won big on foster care. We got $1.4 billion for the BART to San Jose project. That would include a station here next to San Jose State. So getting that money for the transportation system. We want to do I think what we have to do now is do we're going to try next year, something to deal with climate change. It's got to be a high priority. I mean, and we got to pay for it, so we got to deal with that. But the foster care bill it affected in the United States 500,000 foster youth. I mean, it's huge. So I've enjoyed the legislature. It's been a great experience.
Well, what about the other levels of government? What about city and county?
Well, I think the city government was a lot of fun because my wife Pat likes the city government because I get to go home at night every day. I'm up in Sacramento now, so the city government was a lot of fun. I've been married to Pat for 36 years. My wife Pat right here. Thank you, Pat, for putting up with me. So I think I would enjoy the city government in terms of solving problems right here in San Jose. I kind of liked working on development. I worked on building parks, community centers, to transportation, like Highway 87, Highway 85, the light rail system, all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun working on that. And I loved working with Janet Gray Hayes and Susan Hammer and some of the mayors. Some of them I didn't like working with, but those two I liked. But I think it was very fun working with all my colleagues. When I first got on, should I tell them how many men and women?
Yes.
Okay, there was 3 guys, and including Janet Gray Hayes, 8 women. So it was a women council, and it was kind of, in a way, as a young 28-year-old, they kind of taught me a lot about collaboration and working together, and kind of, so I actually learned a lot of skills from the women, especially Janet Gray Hayes. So it was very good.
So did you enjoy working in city government enough that you would want to run for mayor in 2022?
Ask Pat. So we have to make a decision. I represent right now about 80% of the city of San Jose. That's why probably you're asking that question. But I represent a lot of San Jose. I'm pretty known well. I guess I'm well known in San Jose. What you think?
I guess.
Okay.
You keep getting elected.
Yeah, 20 times. Been elected 20 times.
20 times, right?
Yeah, so
That must be a record.
I don't know. Don Edwards probably has.
We can check.
Norm Manette and Don Edwards. Zoe Lofgren probably. Zoe, I worked with Zoe. She told me when I became a member of the Board of Supervisors, make sure you protect the public hospital. That's what Zoe Lofgren told me. She was leaving, going to Congress, and she said, Jim, protect the public hospital. We need a public hospital. We need a public health system. And that's what she said to me.
Let's talk about money. So in 2016, you raised a little over $2 million. Over half of that was from labor unions and Democratic Party organizations. But a lot of elected officials really complain about the necessity of constant fundraising. Was it a big hassle for you? Was it hard? And do you think we need further campaign finance reform in California?
Of course I do. My tendency is to raise enough, not overwhelming. My approach is to raise enough to win and don't raise over that amount, whatever you think it is. I think it's cautious. I have a conservative view about raising money for myself. I'd much rather raise money to defeat Donald Trump this coming year. So that's kind of going to be my goal, is work on national level as much as I can. We do need to have financial reform. It would be nice to have public financing or some kind of restrictions on, especially things like having lobbyists have fundraisers for legislators the same day they're voting on bills, right? I mean, what the heck, that's not good. Funding trips to places all over the world and then getting the legislators to go and paying for it, that should be restricted. I've never gone on any of those trips in 13 years I've been a legislator, but a lot of people do. I think it should be banned. I think there should be rules on restricting gifts and campaign donations, and in terms of the city, and we should have full disclosure, and I think there has to be a lot of reforms, and I support all that. I've always voted for that.
You've taken a special interest and introduced multiple bills relating to mental health and also foster youth, as you mentioned in your talk, which is kind of interesting because these aren't significant political constituencies. There's no big political payback for working on bills like this. What sparked your interest? Why put so much time and energy into these policies?
Well, I think I answered that question when I gave my speech. I think it's like going around and talking to people and finding out what the issues are in the community, and so many people, so many families have substance abuse problems, mental health problems. Certainly my family has. And I think we have to deal with it as we have about one of the worst mental health programs compared to other states here in California. We are so backward. And when I go to visit the women's prison today and find out that out of the 3,000 women there, 1,300 on antipsychotic medication. Antipsychotic medication, we're spending $120,000 a year to incarcerate them, and they're on antipsychotic medications. And we have we have a mental health system. It's really good. We either make them homeless or send them to prison. That's our mental health system. We don't have adequate mental health systems. Even the women said it took, their appointments were 3 months apart, right? And you had to have a antipsychotic medication to get an appointment for your mental health counseling in the women's prison. That's what they told us today. It's horrible. And the Kaiser mental health people that are striking, 2 to 3 months to get an appointment. So I've introduced a lot of bills that do away with that. And another one is medical assisted drug abuse treatment. You know, when you go in, your doctor will say you need substance abuse medication to help you wean yourself off of drugs. You have to go to the insurance company. You actually have to go to the insurance company and get prior authorization through a process that could take weeks from the insurance company to get medication to get you off drugs. And Dr. Gerson talked to me earlier about taking a group of his students up to speak with me and mentioned that 2 of them heard what I said about substance abuse treatment, and the 2 students that came with him to visit me in the Capitol then became strident advocates for substance abuse reform, to get free, unrestricted medication for people that have substance abuse and need substance abuse treatment. Why do we let people get into drugs and then just simply put them in prison and spend $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year putting them in prison? It's ridiculous. It's part of the incarceration, over-incarceration of people. So I obviously have strong opinions about it, especially after what I heard from the women today. Almost entire group of women were all victims of childhood sexual abuse in the prison, almost every single one of them. And they needed counseling, help, and not incarceration. What's wrong with us? So that's why I do the mental health stuff. And I have to take on the insurance companies. They'll oppose every bill I do. The insurance companies will oppose every bill I do. You know, so I have to fight the biggest lobby in Sacramento, which is the insurance companies. So I'm willing to take them on. A lot of people told me there's no constituencies. Like you said, well, there is. It's you. It's you. Not those people in Sacramento, it's you people. Thank you.
What about foster youth? Why are they special to you?
Well, like I said earlier, when I went to prison, I've been to 26 prisons. I don't go to the free trips to China, Hawaii, Switzerland. I go to 26 prisons. The prisoners, the wardens say that over half the inmates in the prison have been through the foster care system. So they are abused as children, and since we don't take care of them and give them adequate care, they end up going to prison. And I think there's something wrong with that, and I think we have to have them in San Jose State, we have to have them in all the universities, you have to get through and be successful. They need we need to have counseling for mental health for everybody in this room, in this school. We have to have counseling programs that you can walk in and not wait and get counseling for everybody. What kind of, even for people that have anxiety, stress, the grades, they should be able to talk to people right now. And what would happen to the grade point average of the average student if we had a really strong mental health counseling program here at San Jose State? So we've been advocating for that, getting funding for that. So that's why I'm supporting the foster youth bills that I've done. I'm going to do another one. We're talking to the coalition about extending the age beyond 21. How many people graduate by the time they're 21? Not too many, right? What, professors?
Nobody.
Nobody. So we need to extend the age. Well, a couple people did, okay? This guy's in. You're not foster youth. You've never been foster youth, okay? So we need to have the age extended so they can stay in school and get support and get through. Because what happens when they hit 21 and they're in college, you know what happens? A lot of them drop out. We don't need that. So the drop-off of foster youth when they turn 21 because they don't have support, they drop out. And I'll say that Leonard Edwards is a key advisor on this, being the former national leader on dependency court for foster youth. Judge Leonard Edwards advises me on this. He's been advising me for 25 years, okay?
Jim, we're going to go to audience questions in a minute, but I'm just going to first take the privilege of having the microphone in my hand to say three things I've admired about Jim Beall. One, he thinks big. He's thinking at the 10,000, 30,000, 40,000 level, feet high, policy level all the time. But I'm one of his constituents. I live in his district, and I know the other thing he does is he thinks about the very specific things in his district. So he gets stuff done for the district while he's thinking about higher level policy that affects everybody statewide. And the third thing is he hires more San Jose State graduates for his staff than any other elected official in the county.
That's true.
And not only that, they stay with him. He keeps staff longer than I think any other.
Did you say my wife graduated from San Jose State? I think you didn't list her. My wife Pat went to San Jose State too.
Of course she did. Of course she did. Okay, so our audience has some political questions. Do you have a preferred candidate in the Democratic presidential primary?
Oh, I'm supporting Kamala Harris, but I'm also, I like Pete, kind of like Pete, I'm sort of interested in what he's saying. I'm sort of a swirl, depending on the day. Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, Pete, and Kamala Harris. I'm kind of like, it's like, okay. So I haven't made up my mind yet. I was swirling around in my head about him. I want to hear more kind of substance, and as we get closer to the California primary, I think we will. Okay.
And what about the race to succeed you? Will you endorse in that race?
Like David Cortese and Ann Ravel, both those two.
So you're doing a dual endorsement?
I'm just saying I like both of them.
Okay. Okay.
I do not favor any other candidate.
Okay, here's a big question. Thoughts on the Electoral College? Should the United States change to a popular vote for president?
Ooh, yes, I think they should. I think it was a travesty that Hillary Clinton got, how many more votes than Trump?
Several million.
5,000, 5 million? Is it 5 million?
3.
3 million?
3, 4.
And then she didn't become president. I mean, Yes.
So yes. Here's a little historical question, sort of. What did your family do when you were homeless?
Well, we kind of like, we had 10 kids, so one of the problems is we couldn't find a place to live. And so we kind of spread the children around. I, my brother and Pat and I went to work as in agriculture farm workers. We worked, I actually worked as a farm, hoed vegetables for about 10 years, picked fruit, vegetables, was a, picked fruit to make some money for the family. So we had to all contribute. The insurance didn't cover a lot of the cost of repairing our house. It took a long time to do that. My family was, so we were out in the Central Valley for a lot of the time. The older ones, which I was kind of, my brother Pat and I were the two older brothers, and we went out in the Central Valley together and hoed vegetables with the now illegal short hoe. I got a sense of social justice then and looked at what happened to immigrants and saw a lot of discrimination. This is when I was 14, and down in Kern County and places like that, where the sheriff would come out on Friday and the labor contractors would have the sheriff flash the lights, and then they'd yell, "La Migra, La Migra," and then the people that were undocumented would run away, and then they wouldn't get paid because Friday was payday. See, so I saw that. I saw people being cheated, so I got angry, and my brother and I, I think when we seen that, we kind of sat down in the housing, the labor camps, and we said, should we go slash the sheriff's tires? What should we do? We were thinking of like doing something violent, like they said, no, let's figure out how we can help these people. So we went talked to I guess we talked to the labor contractor and how would I say, convinced him not to do that anymore. We're both kind of big. I think I was 14, but I was still pretty, big. I guess all my brothers. I'm kind of the middle-sized one. I want to say it that way. So we're right, Leonard. We're all big, tall people.
So shifting gears,
right.
Should the state of California continue to pursue high-speed rail?
Yes, I think so. I think we can do it. I think we need to do for climate change. I'm tired of taking an airplane, which pollutes. I think we should have a high-speed rail. It would result in this county alone of $5 to $6 billion worth of construction. We need to have a connection with the Valley and Los Angeles. I think we should continue to build the high-speed rail. We have to build it in a cost-effective, efficient manner, and I think we ought to have Norberto Duenas run the High-Speed Rail Commission. We need some good management of the high-speed rail.
Does it drive you nuts how long it takes for these things?
I think the construction of transportation facilities drives me nuts, yeah. When we did Highway 85, Norberto they said 20 years, and then we built all the freeways in 9.5 years. So we cut their timeline in half, and it saved billions of dollars, right? And we got some national awards for doing that, right? We in terms of, it can be done. I think of the way they do things. They do it in a procedural, step-by-step way in terms of the construction, planning, and development. And what they ought to do is like merge all these processes together and engineer the projects and build them in a more effective and efficient manner. And they can do that. If we had no funding constraints on the high-speed rail, it can be built in about 6-7 years. So I think part of their constraint is the financing. Most projects of that size are financed, My brother works in Japan. He's lived in Japan for Michael, who got his engineering and mechanical engineering master's degree here. He's now building airports and other projects in Japan. He says they just decide and then they they have strong environmental standards, and they build the rail lines much more faster than we do here. So it can be done with good environmental quality standards. And we need to kind of get out of our bucket that we're in on construction of major transportation facilities. In the other countries, the national government funds these things. In this country, it's almost like the exact opposite. The local government funds a lot of the highways and stuff. We pass half-cent sales tax, and then finally we did SB1. The state put up $50 billion for the state for doing all the transportation projects. But in other countries, these big projects are funded by the national government. In our country, we get nothing from the national government. The United States has no investment in infrastructure. So we need an infrastructure national. That should be something the candidates should be talking about. They haven't really yet, have they?
No.
So that's one of the reasons I'm sort of waiting to see in which candidate's going to start to talk about this stuff. I think it's important.
What do you think about Proposition 13 and the reform that's going to be on the ballot next year?
I'm going to support it. It's the way to, before Proposition 13, the commercial sector paid much higher taxes, and it's been shifted to the residential sector in terms of, like, if you look at the way property tax, and not only property tax, but income tax and sales tax, the burden is now on the middle class, so the tax system through Proposition 13 has become regressive. There's all kinds of personal income and corporate income tax, sales tax loopholes that now exist that result in a lot of companies, major multi-tens of billion-dollar companies paying very little tax and not paying their fair share. When property transfers, it's supposed to be assessed, but what happens is people transfer the corporate entity, not the property, so they avoid paying the property tax when the transfer occurs. And I think it's resulted in several corporations not having their assessments increased in terms of taxes. And I think we have to reform that. It's like, it's Proposition 13 was really sold to help residential homeowners, and it has helped homeowners. That part has helped homeowners. The part that they're changing in the proposition is actually to leave that alone, the homeowner part alone, and readjust the tax on commercial non-residential property, which I think is the way to do it.
So here's a question that combines, or that addresses your knowledge of both state and local government. Here's the question. It's great that funding for affordable housing is being passed at the state and local level, but zoning in cities often restricts multi-unit housing. Should state law override city zoning, or is local control more important?
Well, it's not an either or with me. I think the original SB 50 law went too far. I don't like that law the way it was written. I think it had like you can build high density next to a bus stop. Well, what if they do like Santa Clara County did, change the bus stops? All of a sudden there's no bus stop there, and you got a big building. And I think it's more appropriate to build high density around rail transit stops where you're going to have a physical thing that's going to be there for 50, 100 years, rail transit, and you can also deal with higher density in what Los Angeles is doing in terms of their urban planning is creating these transit villages at various locations, which can significantly increase the number of high-density, affordable housing. Just because it's high density doesn't really, or creating zoning changes doesn't really create affordable housing. Because when you change the zoning, the property values go up on those properties. You're making money for the property owners and the developers. You're not helping somebody that's a low income, that's looking for an affordable housing project. So I think there has to be financing of affordable housing as part of the package. And the governor was not happy when we didn't proceed with SB 50 last year, and the price we paid for not doing that is he vetoed my bill, SB 5, which financed affordable housing. So we're going to go to the governor and say, hey, Gov, you know, if you want to do a housing program, you got to have all these elements. You can't just have the zoning part. You have to have the financing for affordable housing and student housing. You know, we got $250,000 in the budget, and what we did with that is we gave it to San Jose State University, and they're now planning to tear down the state building and where the camera theaters are and build 1,200 units of student housing. So, you know, we're going to have some student faculty housing over there. And then have, on the mall side, we're going to have some theaters on that side. So you're going to be next to the Hammer Theater. So they're doing some, the university and the state are now doing the planning on that. We hope that project comes to fruition in the next 3 years, okay? So what do you think? We had some faculty housing, some student housing. It's what I hear all the time. And I want the student housing to be affordable so you can have, you know, you don't have to pay like the dorms here. I heard it was like $16,000 for a student. Does somebody know? Am I right? Is that close? Dorm students? Am I right? Thumbs up? Okay. See, that's a little too much for me. I mean, I had a $55 a month room when I went here. And I don't really like the way we finance education. We make people go get loans, you know, the student tuition and the cost. You have to go out and borrow a lot of money, and that wrecks your goals that you have in your life. I mean, if you have to have such large loans, you know. So I want to make the cost of going to San Jose State more affordable. San Jose State, you know, why do we have that statue over there with the guys raising their hands? You know, why do we have that? We have that because we're for everybody here at San Jose State. We let everybody go to school here, and we don't want to burden people. We want to educate people and not burden them with the cost of having to borrow money to go to school at this school. And that's very important to me since I was obviously not wealthy when I went to school here. I had to work. I had a job here.
Maybe you've answered this just now, but Jesus Soriano wanted to ask this question, and I want to get it in for sure. So last year, out of 189 students reaching out to San Jose State University Cares seeking assistance, 6 students were offered emergency housing. What do you think could be done about this?
I think there's a simple answer. Give them vouchers and go and let them live in motels until they can find a place to live. I mean, I think the cost of that would be a very quick thing to do, and we should fund that. So I think not just the university here, but the whole system should fund student homeless vouchers for students that, I had a lot of students that got, you know, when I was the housing, I did this. A lot of students were kicked out of their apartments for racial reasons. The guy that has the statue there, when I went to school here, Carlos, he was kicked out of his apartment because racial reasons, discrimination. So why wouldn't we have something that helps students like that, you know, like fight the discrimination that's occurring? You know, we have to fight that. We have to have fair housing laws and enforce the fair housing laws. So I'm for the university. The university has to recognize that students are discriminated against. You know, they're discriminated against. And the university should step forward when they have a homeless student and help those homeless students find a place to live by giving them a voucher. Housing voucher is the way to do it. Sometimes it might be like a short term, like they might get kicked out like a month or so before their schools. You know, that's what I found a lot when I was here. A lot of students would, like in April, they would lose their housing, you know, and they just needed 2 more months to finish up. And I actually had students lived in my unit. They'd sleep on the floor. Yeah, I remember one that went for a PhD at Yale. Remember, I know what I'm talking about?
Jim?
Jim? Yeah, he slept on my floor for a month. Remember Jim? He's
Sure.
got his PhD at Yale, and he needed to finish up his master's here, and he slept in my unit when I was here.
Jim Bailey.
James Bailey.
What are your views on private prisons? Are there any bills in the works
Oh,
you support
That's
against
a good question.
private prisons?
Talked about that a lot today. Well, we have a law that passed, Assemblyman Bonta passed a law that says we are going to close down and eliminate all private prisons in California. And I voted for that, and I strongly favor that. I think in fact, we ought to look forward to maybe closing some of our state prisons as we reduce incarceration, right? So like I said earlier, there's a lot of people in prison that are mentally ill. They don't belong in prison, perhaps. They should be put into, we should have a stronger mental health program. And if we do so, we can reduce that population. The county jail specifically, we should, and a lot of the private prisons are now shifting to the county jails, not the state, because we passed that law. So a lot of them are now county facilities. Why have somebody pre-trial have to stay in prison because they can't afford the bail? So we have to have bail reform. The bail reform law has to be passed. And half the people in Santa Clara County's jail are there because they can't afford bail. They haven't been found guilty. They haven't been tried. They might have been picked up. And when they finally go to trial, Leonard, they finally go to trial and then usually released after a short stay in the county jail, and then they're released. But it costs us money to put them in jail, right? So the judge just verified what I was saying. So I think it's a waste of our taxpayers' money, certainly, and we can spend it on other things. So I think reducing private prisons have lower standards for their employees. What's that book that was written about the guy that spent like 4 months in the private prison? There was a book that just came out. I read the thing. You should read Garrick Percival's book on Smart on Crime. Right, Garrick? Some of the people have read that, Dr. Percival's book. It's really good. It goes over a lot of the reforms that we can do to lower but if we lower the private prisons only exist because we don't have enough room in the state prisons, okay? They're kind of the overflow in a sense. So if we reduce the number of people in state prisons and lower the crime rate at the same time, I think we will succeed in eliminating all the private prisons. You don't need them.
Our time is almost up, so
Okay.
I'm going to ask one more question. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions from the audience. I will
I'll
give them
stick around.
I will give, yeah, he will stick around, but I'll also give them to him so you
Okay.
can see what you were thinking about. An awful lot of them revolved around homelessness, Jim. But my final question is, many elected officials notoriously coast through their final years as they face term limits. What are your plans for the next year?
Well, I'm introducing a housing bill. I'm going to have a mental health parity bill. I'm going to have a foster care bill to extend the age. I'm going to have a bill that requires drug treatment without prior authorization, like I talked about. We're going to have a whole package of legislation. We're looking for other ideas. I'm going to have a transit bill. I'm going to have a transit finance bill. I'm going to have a bill that deals with global warming, and my staff's going to be very busy. I need a lot of interns. So we have. I think we were the first legislator to hire and pay interns.
You were.
I was, wasn't I?
Yes.
So
First to pay.
So I'm like, I put money on the table for you, and I have. Do we have some of my interns here? Some of my interns may be here. I don't know. I know one that used to be an intern right here, Roberto. Yeah, it's like when he came over here.
Jonathan
Jonathan was an intern. Yeah, Jonathan He got his BA here at San Jose State Political Science last year, right? Yeah, so he got his BA last year. So, yeah, I paid the interns. When I finish here, I'm organizing right now with Pat. We're going to establish with the Spartan Foundation an internship for the political science department. I'm establishing it. I know that my friend John McLemore recently established a $25,000, what was it, an internship? Oh, scholarships. You're just giving money. You're not requiring them to work, right? So his is better. So he has a scholarship program for San Jose State political science. John has put up 25 grand. We urge other alumni to put up money so that we can have San Jose State be an affordable option for students that want to study political science. Yeah, it's very important. And my family is going to help out, and we hope others that have the wherewithal to do that will do also. Okay, so we urge everybody to do that. If you have an ability to do that, we want you to help the students here stay in San Jose, complete their degrees, and go on to be mayors, Congress members, judges, other kinds of leaders in our community. So,
Well, thank you for your service.
thank you.
Thank you for this.
Thank you. Well.
Join us in a round of applause for Dr. Terry Christensen and State Senator Jim Beall.